Currently, the Clippers' record is 16-13, 3 games above 500, which is not bad, but I expect more from the Clippers. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you the issue I have with them and the problem that I see that keeps continuing to occur. Let's go ahead and talk about it. I want to talk about the problem I have with the Clippers. But at the same time, I still want to give them a little bit of credit because, like I said, they are 3 games above 500 and they are playing fairly well considering the fact they don't have their best player in Kawhi and they haven't had Paul George the last couple games. But honestly, this season, to be honest with you, it hasn't really panned out the way I thought that it should for this team so far. I thought there would be a little bit more, fireworks, a little bit more, flair with the team in regards to how they would play and how they would execute plays and, how they would just be competitive going into this season. And a lot of games I look at, and even some games that they win, some games I've looked at, prior to this past week when I felt like they were playing pretty good. A lot of games that I've looked at this season overall, if I had to grade the team, of course, I would probably give them a C-, because they've stayed afloat. They've stayed, pretty much within reach to do a lot of good things. So you don't want to discredit anything they've done. And I'm not here to do that because they have done some good things. They had a 7-game winning streak this season, 4 or 5-game winning streak as well. So it's like they've done some good things, and that could be due to the fact they had a favorable schedule, or it could just be due to the fact that, it was, just the time they were playing, pretty good basketball. And me personally, I think it has something to do with a little bit of both. But when you look at this team, honestly, I find myself looking at this team shaking my head because there are some nights where I watch the Clippers and they look like they played together. This past week up until last night against the Utah Jazz, previous games with the Suns and the Orlando Magics, the Clippers, they looked more together on the court. They looked like they were fighting for something. They looked like they were playing with pride, looked like they were playing with energy, and they were playing for one another. And I feel like every time Kawhi Leonard or Paul George, one of them is out of the lineup, or if both of them is out of the lineup, this team seems to try to play with more intensity and more of an edge. And I feel like that's something they should be doing while Kawhi Leonard and Paul George is there, to take the load off of those two players so they wouldn't get hurt, or they wouldn't expend too much energy where they really shouldn't have to. And it's just one of those things that you look at a team like this and you just feel like, why can't they bring the same energy every night? Or, what really, bothers me with this team the most sometime when I watch them play is I don't see the same game plan every night. I feel like when I see other good teams, I feel like they have the same game plan every night they play. Like when you look at the Golden State Warriors, they could be down 10, 20 points in the game, but they still play with execution. They still play within that system. They still play with ball movement. It's almost like they never get away from what they do best. They never really abandon it. And that's what I'm saying. With the Clippers, it's different, and that's why you shake your head watching this team at times, because it's like you wonder why certain things happening in a game that shouldn't be happening that the Clippers can control. Honestly, sometimes when I watch the Clippers play certain teams, I do see ball movement. I do see a team trying to play with chemistry. But then there's times where you watch the Clippers and you see all isolation, all one-on-one basketball, showing your handle, seeing, spin move this, holding on the ball too long, shot clock is getting down to like a few seconds, and somebody has to just go ahead and hoist up a shot, and it's not a high percentage shot. And this is what I'm saying. It's little things like that get you beat in the playoffs. And this is where I always talk about basketball IQ. A lot of players have talent. A lot of players can play this game of basketball, but it doesn't mean they have a high level of basketball IQ, because it's it's the little things, it's the intangibles that a high IQ basketball player has and plays with that other players don't. Other players live off their talent. Some players live off their talent and their IQ, which makes them a greater player player or more of an elite player than a role player. And that's just the difference right there. They have a skill level that other players don't have, but they can utilize it to their advantage to make them play on a higher standard. And this is why I said even role players can do the same thing. You don't have to be a superstar to have high basketball IQ, but you have to understand your position and you have to understand what comes with your position and how you can flourish in that position to help your team win. And when I look at the Clippers sometime, what really irks me about this team, like looking at last night's game against Utah, I was looking at instances where Reggie Jackson was just, dribble. Shot clock is getting down, 8 seconds and he takes a floater that he can make, but taking a floater over Rudy Gobert is a lot difficult than taking a floater over somebody like, hypothetically, let's just throw a name out there, DeMar DeRozan or, maybe Chris Paul or somebody like that. You see what I'm saying? It's just a difference because Rudy Gobert makes a difference defensively. So when you go at players like that or come in the paint, you really got to be sure and you really got to know what you're going to do, because he can throw your shot off just by him standing there and with the intimidation of him coming at you because he's such a good shot blocker. And this is my point. It's just little things like that. And of course, there's other things in the game you could look at, but it's little things like that. You look at the Clippers and be like, why are you playing basketball this way? This is not recreational basketball at your local gym. This is an NBA team who is trying to win a championship. And when you don't have your 2-star players, you've got to play with the same mentality, of ball movement, execution, with or without your star players. And this is what I'm saying with the Clippers. To me, that's the biggest issue I have with them. They don't play the same every single night. It seems like they're playing different from night to night, or depending on the competition, the team that they play. That's why I said before in my previous videos, it's almost as if they play down to their competition. And when you do stuff like that, only one result comes out of that, and that's losing. You may get by with it in the regular season, but in the postseason, you're going to find yourself in hard times because you're putting yourself in position to not win because the other team is executing their plays and you're scrambling, just trying to find a way to knock down shots. And this is why I said before about the Clippers, when you live by the three, you die by the three. And the Clippers have been a good 3-point shooting team since they've been assembled the last couple years. But living by that three is good, but it's only good when it's falling. I mean, hell, even when you look at Stephen Curry, as great of a shooter as he is, there's times where his jump shot hurts him. Because if you look at last season, why did he lose to the Memphis Grizzlies in a young Ja Morant who hasn't even turned into a superstar yet in the play-in tournament, if he's the best and the greatest shooter of all time? You would think the greatest shooter of all time can beat a team like Memphis in a play-in tournament and get to the playoffs. But he got knocked off, right? And this is my point. Sometimes the 3-pointer, it can really hurt you in the long run, because if you find yourself going through several games or stretches where it's not falling or your jump shot's not falling, you can lose those games. And in the playoffs, that's how you get beat, and that's how you get sent home. So my thing is with the Clippers, yeah, they do a lot of isolation basketball, but it's a lot of jumpers. It's a lot of 3-pointers. It's not enough. It's not a good mixture of aggressiveness with the 3-pointers. I mean, I don't see a lot of cuts to the basket. I don't see a lot of ball movement in regards to we're trying to get it to the right man to get the highest percentage shot we can get to execute these plays. And like I said before, they should be playing like that with or without Kawhi and PG. I mean, whether they're on the floor or not, they should have the same mentality. They should play with the same type of system every night they step on the floor. Every night they step on the floor, they should average, just hypothetically, if I was going to make up a number, they should average 15 to 20 assists, 30 assists or whatever, per night. Or they should go out there and find high percentage shots every single night going against every team they play. The highest percentage shot they can find, not just shooting threes when you're down 5 or 10 points, because you're going to be down against teams. You're going to be down. Teams are not always going to lay down for you. And, you're not going to go into every game with the highest amount of energy. That's just the way it goes. But at the same time, even though you don't have the highest amount of energy, you can still play the same way and be consistent, because persistence pays. If they play, hypothetically, if the Clippers played with good ball movement, which they definitely have the talent to do so, and they played more together on the floor instead of isolation basketball, and understood what efficiency means on the offensive end, they would be a much better team than 3 games over 500. They'll be much better than that, because they have the talent to play like the Warriors. I mean, look at the Warriors. They don't really even have that many good players. I mean, honestly, like Draymond Green can't score, even though he's a really good player for them, but he can't score. So it's like he's good, but he's not good at the same time, because he can control a game and pass, but he's not effective on the offensive end. So that puts more pressure on Stephen Curry. When Klay Thompson comes back, he's their next best player, and Klay Thompson's great, don't get me wrong, but outside of that, they really don't have no dazzling, type players that wows you like that. Andrew Wiggins is good, he's been impressive, but he's still an average player, or a little bit above average. He's not really like one of those household name type players that a lot of people praise or look at like, yeah, that's the type of guy, you need to win a championship or something like that. He's not looked at as that, you see what I'm saying? Even though he does have, some good qualities to his game, and he's definitely helping the Warriors in a lot of good ways. But this is what I'm saying. They don't have, but so much talent on the floor. They got guys that are understanding a system, and they're playing it to the highest level they can. And Steve Kerr's pulling all the right strings. And that's the same thing the Clippers can be doing. They have the same amount of talent, if not better, than the Warriors. And they don't, now their star player, of course, Paul George, is not better than Stephen Curry, but even still, when you play within a system, you're still supposed to look the same every single night. I've seen games where, I look at other teams and they play with the same type of system or characteristics or the same type of demeanor every night. It doesn't really change. And this is what I'm saying. The good teams, they play with a certain type of edge. They play with a certain type mentality, and next man up mentality is always good. Every team preaches that, but that next man up mentality serves well when you play with more ball movement and find the right guy who can take the highest quality shot. That's the reason why this past week, the 2 games that the Clippers won without Paul George, it seemed like they were playing that way a little bit more. It didn't seem like it was more isolation, or it seemed like they really was actually trying to find a way for everybody to eat on the floor, everybody to contribute. And when you play like that, it always usually equates to winning, or it equates to good things when you persistently do it over and over and over. It equates to good things over time, because it's almost like developing a good habit. When you develop good habits, good things happen in your future, because you're doing things the right way, and things are just going to propel to success after a while, because it's in your DNA and you're practicing good ways. So it makes you a better person, or better at what you're doing over time, because you're practicing it in a good way and you're doing all the right things. It just has to pan out sometime. And that's the same thing. I implement that logic when I think about the Clippers. Play the same way every night. If the Clippers can play with ball movement every night, regardless of whether they hit the 3, whether they're on with their 3s that night, or whether they're like, shooting a high percentage or not, play with ball movement and get the highest percentage shots you can. Sometimes it doesn't always result in a 3-pointer that's the best shot. Sometimes it's a cut to the basket. Sometimes it's a layup. Sometimes it's throwing it into the post to Zubac and let him work a little bit more. I mean, I think he played pretty decent last night, the touches that he had. But my point is, sometimes play within your means. You don't have all that firepower. You don't have superstar firepower on the floor. So since you know that, play the game with more proper execution. Don't play the game with isolation basketball thinking you're going to beat a team like the Utah Jazz, who plays a little bit more within a system to a degree, because Quinn Snyder is a good coach. And it's like you're beating yourself, because to me, if you could beat a team like the Phoenix Suns, you could beat a team like the Utah Jazz. They could have beat them. But like I said, it's almost like at times in games, from the first quarter, the second quarter, sometimes they'll play, how they're supposed to. And then that third quarter, they kind of go back to that, isolation, one-on-one basketball, take turn basketball. And like I said, that always gets you beat in the NBA. So, I mean, my thing is to the Clippers, let's just, try to find a way to play basketball at a high level, as high as you can, but execute those ways, implement those ways, and play that way consistently every night. Because I'm telling you, it's only going to make you a better team and more of a threat to teams. If teams see that you're discombobulated, how you play, you're up and down, Jekyll and Hyde, roller coaster, well, that's going to get you beat, because it's easy for them to really figure out how to beat you, because you're not doing nothing consistently for them to key in on. You're just playing good some nights. It's almost like you're beating some teams off of talent because you're more talented than the other team. You're not beating teams because you're really actually the better team and you know how to execute plays. That's the difference between the regular season and the playoffs. Regular season, you could beat a lot of teams off of your talent just because you got a Paul George, just because you got Kawhi Leonard, just because you got players like that. But in the postseason, the reason why the Clippers looked at themselves down 0-2 and 3-2 against a team like Dallas, who they really should have beaten fairly easy, because it's not enough consistent basketball of execution and playing at a high level to get the high efficiency shots and to get the most effective shots. And if they're not playing that way every single night, no matter who's on the floor, it's going to be an up and down season, or they're going to find themselves in some real deep trouble in the playoffs if they play somebody that really can give them some trouble. So, I mean, it's just one of those things that I don't appreciate. I want to see them, play more the same way all the time. Practice good habits, good things happen. That's all I'm saying. And that's what I think the Clippers should do. That's what I think they should implement. I think Ty Lue should implement that more. But I think the players have to understand it and go out there and play that way and execute plays and have that mental and mindset going into every game. Practice good habits, good things happen over time. But hey, that's my take on the situation. You leave any comments in the comment section. You let me know what you think, as always, and we'll talk about it. And hey, Cali out.